I couldn't really tell you exactly when I realized that movies weren't reality. I mean, most of the movies I was watching as a kid involved people dying in horrible, gruesome ways, so I'm sure that I was told very early on that everything was fake. But I don't really recall the moment that I realized that it was all an illusion. Still, even when you know everything is fake, in every movie there's something real, or at least something that feels real. When a piece of art is made, part of its creator finds its way in, whether they like it or not. Of course, that doesn't mean we can psychoanalyze every movie and conclude that everything within it is a reflection of its creator's beliefs, but there is a strange mirror that lies just beneath the surface. This is most evident, I think, in movies about making movies, and movies about making art in general. I think that's why I've always been fascinated by movies in this weird little niche. There's automatically an extra meta layer on top of a movie about creating something, because the movie in itself had to be created. And in that, you can glean a lot more about what it's like to create a work of art and how different people feel about the journeys they're in. I don't necessarily care about what goes on in the heads of the writers and directors of these movies, but when a movie is about making a movie, you're getting an expert opinion on the creative process. Like asking a car what it's like to drive. I just really like these sorts of movies, so I figured why not spend the night talking about a few and what I like about them. Maybe you'll find something new and interesting to check out, or maybe this will just be good background noise for you. I don't know. When you hear the phrase, movies about making movies, the first thing that probably comes to mind, if you've ever been in a film history class, or just talked to a lot of old people, is likely 1952's Singin' in the Rain. Lauded as one of the greatest films in history, it's also one of the first movies about making movies. For a lot of people, this was their first look into the mysterious world of Hollywood showbiz. It's definitely a touchstone work in this field, as other movies about making movies often feel like they're in direct conversation with this one. But there are interesting things that Singin' in the Rain says about the artifice of Hollywood. For example, having a different singer sing for an actress is an extremely common practice even today. It's more of a surprise when the actual actors do sing in musical movies, like for example in La La Land, which is a movie that makes several direct references to Singin' in the Rain, and is also a romance set in the world of Hollywood. It's a pretty alright movie, I guess. They both are. I think my biggest gripes with these two movies, and ones like them, is how they paint Hollywood as this place where anyone can make it. Kind of an American dream thing. They don't ever focus on the emotions associated with creating art. Not really. Hollywood movies about how awesome Hollywood is feel a little, I don't know, masturbatory, I guess. It's a gross word, but that's the best word I could come up with. Not to say I don't like these movies, I do like the music in both of them at the very least, but I think we all know that there's a darkness to Hollywood. I don't mean that in like a conspiracy theory Alex Jones way either. I just mean that there's something inherently dark about it as a place that kind of swallows people. So many people will have dreams of making it big in the movies and then fly out to Hollywood to get lost in the sea of other people exactly like them. That's something that's touched on in La La Land, but of course since our protagonists are special, it all works out in the end and their hard work pays off, even if they have to sacrifice their love to achieve it. This isn't really realistic though, and I'm not saying that every movie has to be realistic, of course I don't think that would be silly. But it does feel a little bit like propaganda for Hollywood, which it kind of is. This is not a condemnation of anyone who wants to be a big movie star either. If anything, I'm just sad that the world is the way that it is. Hollywood exists as a false promise to a lot of people, and even if it does work out for you, it might not be how you wanted it to. We'll leave Hollywood soon, but I think there's one director who I can't leave out of a discussion about movies about the darkness of Hollywood. That's right, I'm talking about Tom Green. Not really, I'm obviously talking about David Lynch. The guy was obsessed with Hollywood, and California in general. Lost Highway looks at the seedy underbellies and parties that Hollywood big shots attend and host, and Mulholland Drive features the story of a woman trying to make it in Hollywood. But I think that the work of Lynch's that is most directly a movie about making movies is, of course, Inland Empire. Inland Empire is a work about a lot of things. Namely, of course, a woman in trouble. But it, more than any other Lynch work, is something that you could take your own meaning from. I don't think any of us could really comprehend what the secret meaning, quote-unquote, of Inland Empire is, nor should we really try, because that's not the point of movies, and I'm not even sure if there really is a secret meaning. Still, the theme that stuck out the most to me was becoming completely lost in the process of creation. It follows the story of a woman who gets hired to act in a movie, and then the world around her blurs into a confusing mess. It becomes difficult to discern what's a part of the movie and what's her real life, and if she was ever real to begin with. It's kind of like a much weirder Perfect Blue. I don't talk about Perfect Blue in this video. This is the only Perfect Blue mention. Sorry, Perfect Blue heads. Your day will come another time. We see a lot of the realistic experience of living in Hollywood. Maybe exaggerated a bit, with 8 women sharing an apartment together so that they can afford to go to auditions and such, but they end up turning to much darker places. It's simultaneously really grounded and real feeling, but also completely dreamlike and surreal. And I think that's aided by the way it was shot. Instead of being shot on fancy film cameras, Inland Empire was shot entirely on the Sony DSR PD-150 camera, a consumer-grade camcorder that you can get for about $150 on eBay. It doesn't really look like a movie. It looks like a home recording of a football game or a birthday party. And the feeling it creates with that technique is oppressively unsettling. It's kind of a difficult movie to watch, but that's the point. I'm not going to pretend that I understand everything that happens in this movie. I don't really know if anyone can. Even David Lynch probably doesn't really fully understand the meaning of everything that happens in here. But in my most recent viewing, that theme of being absorbed by your work is what stuck out to me. I think it's definitely a bit of an inkblot test. You'll get something different out of it depending on the time you see it, or the kind of person that you are. And each viewing, something different will stand out. I wouldn't say that it's my favorite Lynch work. I'm definitely more inclined towards Fire Walk with Me, but that's besides the point. Inland Empire gets the madness that can come from being a part of a creative project down to a T. Creating something, making something creative is the most fulfilling thing that you could possibly do. So why then would madness be a part of it? Well, the creative process is one that can often be monotonous. At first, writing is fun. You're coming up with all these ideas and having a blast, but then you have to go back and rewrite it to make sure it's good, and then you have to do that again, and then you have to do that again, and then you have to do that again. If you have even a hint of perfectionism inside you, you will very likely continuously tweak things until the very end to make it as good as possible. This can naturally lead to frustration, and frustration can quickly turn to madness. The Shining is not a movie about creation. Not really. But all too often, long writing sessions that end up not bearing the fruits you had hoped feel like the famous all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy scene. Spending long enough working on something fictional brings you to this strange place, where the things you think are the most important stop being the real world around you, but this fictional world you're creating. This is an extremely unhealthy way to live. And I'm going to be real, it can be kind of embarrassing to care so much about something that no one else does. There's a movie that puts this feeling into perspective. And look, bear with me here, because I'm about to argue for the merits of one of the worst things ever made by humanity. But Tom Green's 2001 film, Freddy Got Fingered, is a humbling watch for any creative type. So Tom Green's character, Gord, in this movie, is a lunatic. Let's not sugarcoat it. He's loud, annoying, unpredictable, kind of terrifying, and all of this is because he's completely absorbed in the world of his art, his cartoons. Gord is single-mindedly focused on getting to make cartoons. Not even because he cares about, making money or being famous or anything like that, but just because it's the only thing that seems to make any sense to him. He navigates the world as though it were a cartoon, doing things not because they help preserve his life, or because they make any sense at all, but just because he thinks it's funny. And that alienates him from a lot of people. Everyone in this movie thinks he's fucking crazy. Well, except for his love interest, who doesn't really care about anything other than...
I just want to suck your cock.
Gord makes it in the end. He gets $5 million to make his cartoon, and because of how focused he is on being as silly as possible, he spends all of it on elaborate jokes that end with him getting held hostage in Pakistan. Gord is a scary guy. I think that's also partly because of the way he's been raised. His dad is just as scary, if not scarier than Gord. He's abusive and crass, and it's because of those traits that people easily believe that he sexually abused his son, Freddy, that being where the title of the movie comes from. I think the scene I genuinely like the most in this movie is the intro scene, where Gord sits in his room looking at his drawings and laughing alone about these stupid ideas, like X-Ray Cat, a cat that can see through wooden doors, but only wooden doors, and he saves the day. It's nonsense, and he's doing this as an adult in his childhood bedroom. I'm gonna be honest. I've felt like this before. At certain points in the development of my game, or whenever I'm working on something creative, I'll sometimes get so single-mindedly enamored with it that the world around me dissolves, and I'm left alone chipping away at it, giggling at my own jokes. It's embarrassing to imagine what my roommate or anyone else who happened to walk by thought of me in those moments. But I can't say I regret it. Obviously, I don't relate to him in any way other than this. But this sort of self-absorbed creative psychosis is something that I think a lot of people have experienced at some point in their lives. I hope. Now, with all of that said, Freddy Got Fingered is better known for being one of the worst movies ever made. A movie so bad that it ruined the careers of the actors in it and permanently scarred everyone who watched it. I kinda love it though. I've seen it more times than is socially acceptable, and every time I've watched it I've laughed my ass off. I've seen it more times than movies I genuinely consider to be the best things I've ever seen. This isn't even the first time I've gone to bat for this shitty movie in a YouTube video. The old one's privated, don't ask. This movie is weirdly captivating to me. Gord might be alienating to everyone around him by playing with that deer carcass or delivering that baby, but it is admittedly really fucking funny. A lot of people today talk about this movie like it was secretly a subversive meta masterpiece, that nothing in it was meant to be funny, and it's actually a parody of comedy movies. And while that may be partially true, I think the main goal of this movie was to make people laugh, and it achieves that goal very well. It's definitely not for everyone. I mean, it's a rather tasteless movie, to say the least. I don't know a lot about the life of Tom Green, but this movie feels at least a little autobiographical. A lot of these types of movies do. Tom Green is someone who became successful by doing the exact sort of irreverent stunts and bits that Gord pulls in Freddy Got Fingered, and I could imagine this type of life would alienate someone from the world a little bit. I do know that Tom Green just tries to live a simple life out on a farm somewhere, though. It's probably a nice change of pace from the mania of Freddy Got Fingered. So far we've been looking at individualized experiences with creativity, how projects can eat one person alive. But more often than not, there's more than just one person involved in a creative work. And when a work is that grand in scale, it might consume each and every person within, one by one. Mamoru Oshii's Talking Head is an extremely fascinating movie. Of all the works I'm talking about today, this is the one that plays with the medium the most. A lot of the scenes feel less like scenes in a movie and more like discussions of film philosophy. A so-called phantom animation director who can replicate anyone's style and get the job done on time no matter what is brought in to finish an animated movie. The titular Talking Head in less than 2 months. In taking the job, he is given a business card that, in the words of the producer, is a one-way ticket to the movie. What is meant by this becomes immediately clear as the director walks into the studio as if in a funeral procession. There's no turning back now. The film plays out more like a mystery than anything else, as the director is forced to figure out what the movie he's supposed to be making was even about. Supposedly there was a serial killer involved, and then it seems that reality echoes fiction as the crew of the film start to be picked off one by one. That meta angle alone would make the film an interesting watch, but I think the presentation itself is what makes this movie so special. Talking Head throws realism out the window. The first conversation the director has with the writer of the movie explains that as we embraced realism more and more, we lost the original joy of movies as a sort of magic trick. Talking Head feels like magic. It feels like something difficult to comprehend by humans. Many of the rooms don't have walls. Sound effects and laugh tracks play when there should be none there. One of the characters is just a cartoon. Others speak in unnatural voices. My favorite part are the multiple driving scenes where the characters sit in a stage car and pretend to drive while having discussions. The entire movie takes place in this hazy orange studio where time never seems to pass. Talking Head is a really good movie. It touches on similar themes to Inland Empire, but no disrespect to David Lynch, I think it expresses them in a much more interesting and clear way. The movie Talking Head, as in the movie inside the movie Talking Head, has become the reality of all the people working on it. They don't see anything else, they don't think about anything else, but their efforts bear no fruits. When the director first arrives, he's given a cassette tape with a piano sketch of the film's main theme. The only thing that remains of the movie the crew had spent so long working on. When the director plays it, everyone in the studio stops what they're doing and listens in quiet reverence. It's a beautiful scene in a way. You can see that while these people have their different focuses, they are all in this madness together, for better or worse. This song brings them together. Of course, it doesn't matter how together they are if they can't meet the deadline. Crunch is probably the worst part about any creative project. Overworking to meet a deadline. Ideally, it would never happen, but in practice, it's rare that it doesn't happen. If a deadline is involved, there will always be loose ends that need to be hastily tied up. In the animation industry, especially, this is a huge problem because of how strict deadlines are for movies and TV shows, and how much work goes into making one. The crew of Talking Head were driven mad by crunch, put into a purgatory-like state that they couldn't escape from. But more often, crunch feels like a big hammer that flattens you like a pancake, like the hammer King Dedede from the Kirby franchise uses. When I decided to make this video, one of the first things that came to my mind, even though it's not a movie, was that famous episode of Kirby Right Back at Ya, Cartoon Buffoon. This episode, which acts more like an educational look into the world of animation for children than a standard episode of the series, is pretty cute. It's a lighthearted look at the more stressful parts of the animation industry that I feel likely acted as a bit of vent art as well. An animation studio making an episode of a series where a greedy, lazy asshole producer overworks a bunch of people and gets his just desserts. They probably got the idea from some real experiences. I like when it turns into the last episode of Evangelion a lot. However, my first introduction to the actual production of animated shows was episode 10 of Paranoia Agent, which is basically the evil version of the Kirby episode. It places a similar emphasis on educating the viewer about the different jobs in the industry, but you know, it's an episode of Paranoia Agent, so it devolves into psychological horror. The most classic story about a creative project undergoing some horrific troubles during its development is, of course, Phantom of the Opera. But one movie dares to ask the question, what if Phantom of the Opera was awesome? Phantom of the Paradise is one of my favorite movies, ever. And wouldn't you know it, it's a movie about making something. A cantata in this instance. An adaptation of the classic story Faust into a rock opera musical. Of course, the movie itself is a loose adaptation of Phantom of the Opera in the form of a rock opera musical. The music was done by Paul Williams of Nancy Drew and the Hardy Boys Meet Dracula fame. He also plays the main villain of the movie, Swan, who steals up-and-coming composer Winslow Leach's cantata. Everyone in this movie is named after a bird, by the way. Swan is one of the most evil-feeling characters I've ever seen in a movie. He seems to have the entire world under his control. People do not clap at music until he claps. They do not create unless he tells him to. He talks calmly and walks slowly, no matter the situation, and yet there's so much venom in everything he does. The way he warps Winslow, who also becomes the Phantom in question's work, into silly pop songs about being a bad boy and driving cars, and insane glam metal songs about having sex feels so spiteful, even if those songs are awesome. It really shows how working in the music industry is often a Faustian bargain in itself. It's also really funny to me that Swan's actor wrote the music in real life, but is pretending to pass it off as his own in the movie. It makes you wonder if the real Paul Williams also has a weird twink trapped inside his wall of writing music for him. Probably not, but anything can happen. If you take nothing else from this video, go watch Phantom of the Paradise. It's fucking sick. But what about horrors on the set of a real movie? I don't mean documentaries or biopics. Rather, something more interesting. Sort of metatextual stories about the creation of movies that blur the lines between reality and myth. Nosferatu is one of the most famous horror movies ever made. Even if today he's mostly known for his light-flickering compulsions and the recently released Robert Eggers remake. I remember as a kid, my dad once told me that Nosferatu was known as one of the scariest movies of all time. Even today, there's still an uncanniness to it. It's part of the German Expressionismus film movement, which is focused less on realism, but rather capturing the feelings of the story being told. So, many of the environments and sets are put together in strange ways with overemphasized shadows. That's a whole rabbit hole on its own, but essentially by using these techniques, even in a silent film like Nosferatu, divorced completely from reality, the feeling of profound terror is still effectively portrayed to the audience. It's also one of the earliest horror movies, which at the time made it all the more shocking to viewers. Max Schreck, the actor who played Count Orlok, the vampire, yeah, his name isn't actually Nosferatu. You probably know that, but whatever, it's important to know, was, at least according to several contemporary sources, rumored to possibly be an actual vampire due to his reclusive nature. In my research, I strangely can't find any mention of this legend online prior to the release of 2000's Shadow of the Vampire, which takes this urban legend, quote-unquote, and turns it into a movie. Shadow of the Vampire is a really funny concept for a movie. What if they got a real vampire to play Count Orlok? It plays with the history of the movie's production in an interesting way that turns the fictional horror of Nosferatu into a real horror that affects the people trying to create that horror. The horror that they've created becomes a real thing that terrorizes them. But when we're talking about movies in which real horrors terrorize the creators of a movie, the obvious place your mind likely goes to is the found footage genre. You have the Blair Witch Project, obviously, a story of a documentary about a mythical monster that ends up getting a little closer to the truth than is safe. You also have the Creep movies, which flip things around a bit, making the monster into the one crafting the narrative. And you have the popular Koji Shiraishi films, The Cult and Noroi the Curse, which both deal with the same feeling of flying too close to the sun. All of these movies are great. And there are several more I didn't mention by name that are also pretty cool. But I am especially fascinated by the concept of a hoax becoming a reality over the course of a story. Lake Mungo does this. So does, Everyman Hybrid, if that counts, I guess. But I think the film that does this in the most relevant way to today's discussion is Butterfly Kisses. Butterfly Kisses is a deceptively interesting movie. When I first watched it, I expected it to be standard fare found footage stuff, which would have been fine by me. But it's more than that. Way more. The movie Butterfly Kisses is a documentary about a guy who discovers the tapes for a movie called Butterfly Kisses, who then tries to re-edit the footage which he found and genuinely believes to be real into a feature film, also called Butterfly Kisses. There are a ton of layers to this thing, and for a bit I was genuinely convinced that it might have been a real story of a guy faking a haunting for found footage fame. But of course things go off the rails. The main character, Gavin York, feels like a real guy. A very flawed and frustrating guy, but still real. He is also someone consumed by his creation, or the creation of those who came before him. The movie itself is like a curse that slowly ruins his life. Even if there was no monster, it's hard to imagine that Gavin would make it out of this situation alive. I think what's so compelling about movies like Butterfly Kisses is how real they feel. Not just in the fact that they're immersive, but in the way that they portray themselves as true stories. Found footage films and mockumentaries shatter the fourth wall that existed in the world of film. Instead of us viewing the world of the film, it feels like the film is invading our world. As if the movies themselves are staring back at us. There's a double-edged sword to this, though. Especially in the age of the internet, when we can see literally everything that happens on video, everything becomes a movie. People's lives are broadcast to the internet in their entirety, turned into a TV show for all of us to watch. But the same is true of world-shattering events. Wars and deaths and horrible things that no one should ever see are just a few clicks away. I remember when January 6th happened, it didn't feel like a real event, but some kind of strange film. The end to the season of a television show. Of course I was a little scared. It was horrible what they were doing. But I also couldn't look away. Death is a movie. Tragedy is a movie. How do you create something real when even the things that define our history feel like fiction? In 2003, the film Peep TV Show was released. A movie about this exact concept. I think I came upon this movie in the same way everyone else who's seen it has. 2-ish years ago, I was scrolling through my recommended videos on YouTube, and there it was, sitting there. These two people in cool street fashion sitting below an image of the Twin Towers exploding on 9/11. With a thumbnail like that, you think I'm not gonna click it? I watched it and was immediately captivated by how accurate its assessment of our current internet was. How well it captured the disenchanted feeling of primarily engaging in reality through a screen. I haven't been able to stop thinking about it since I first watched it. It's technically a fiction, but it feels more real than any documentary. Because it is real, in a sense. I mean, Hasegawa didn't actually spy on people who weren't actors, and Moe is not the real name of the woman who plays that character. But these two are real. All of the characters were played by people who are actually like their film counterparts. Moe was played by a gothic Lolita with BPD, and the hikikomori in the film was played by a real hikikomori. The movie's plot revolves around the unlikely connection fostered between a disaffected suicidal gothic Lolita named Moe and a strange man who records people without their knowledge, named Hasegawa. Together they create a website where people can get the chance to see something real, whether that be a woman sitting in her apartment after work, Hasegawa being kicked by an escort, or a live broadcast where viewers can determine the fate of a cat. It's an extremely transgressive movie. Probably the most difficult to parse movie out of all of the ones I've mentioned in this video. It's a difficult thing to recommend for sure, but this movie is also one of my favorites, at least in the top 10, but ranking movies is a fool's endeavor. Still, I don't really want to spoil too much of this movie or go way too into detail. I think that over-explaining it would kind of ruin some of the charm. I think you should experience it for yourself. Through creating their website, these two strange people formed an unlikely connection. The two of them found a deeper relationship than they had with anyone else. Not something romantic, but a mutual understanding of creative visions. When you're working with someone on a project, there's this sort of mutual flow state you can reach where both of you are firing on all cylinders and spitballing ideas back and forth. Now, there's more to creating something than just coming up with cool ideas with your friends. But if you both get invested in it, you'll work even harder. I have a feeling that if I was working on my game with someone rather than completely alone, it wouldn't have been nearly as difficult. Not for the obvious reason that my workload would have been halved, but that I would have to complete it for someone. Doing something on your own, it doesn't matter if you give up everything. But if you're working with someone, you'd be disappointing them. For about a year, I've been making music with my friends in a band, but it has been absurdly difficult to get things off the ground until very recently. We went through 3 drummers and 2 guitarists before getting our current lineup because of scheduling conflicts and other issues. There were several times when I thought, damn, this shit sucks ass. We should just give up. If I had gone through that many hoops to make my game, I would have given up very quickly. But I loved making music with my friends, and they loved doing it too. So making it work, no matter how many hoops we had to jump through, was important. Giving up would be selfish. A long time ago, there was something I wanted to make with someone. It probably wasn't ever going to go anywhere due to certain circumstances, but there was that shared creative vision there. A mutual understanding and taste in media that could create something really unique. But sometimes, life gets in the way. Look Back is a movie adaptation of Tatsuki Fujimoto's one-shot of the same name. It follows 2 girls, Fujino and Kyomoto, who end up creating manga together. They have this connection where they'll spend hours next to each other, drawing and writing endlessly, and it's beautiful. Even though they don't exchange too many words, you can tell they're connected. Maybe because they don't exchange many words. When you reach a certain level of friendship, it doesn't matter if you say anything. You know you're there for each other. But eventually the 2 of them have creative differences. Fujino wants to pursue creating manga full-time, but Kyomoto just wants to get better at drawing background art. This splits them apart. The dynamic duo is no more. And while they do still care for one another, they don't see each other at all until Kyomoto is murdered. Senselessly, the person who understood Fujino the most, the person who motivated her to create manga in the first place, which has now defined her entire life, is gone. It's difficult to move on from something like that. It's almost impossible. Losing someone changes you. Fujimoto's other one-shot, Goodbye Eerie, plays with this idea even more. Portraying someone in art can alter the way you remember them. The protagonist of Goodbye Eerie creates a film to honor his dead mom and his dying friend, Eerie. And both of them were complicated people. His mother was downright evil and abusive towards him sometimes, but in the film he creates to memorialize her, only the good remains. The same is true for Eerie, a cruel, manipulative person to some, but also someone who sees beauty in the world, someone funny, and sometimes even kind in a strange way. The memories of these people are rewritten in the art they exist within, and it's a false narrative, but it's a pleasing one. It's nice to imagine that when we die, all there remains is the good. It's nice to be able to grieve without feeling complicated about it. At least I could imagine it would be. In Look Back, Fujino almost gives up on her manga and life in general. She doesn't know how to go on without Kyomoto. It's hard to blame her, but eventually she realizes that yes, Kyomoto is gone. but her memory is not. If she was what got her into making manga in the first place, then she will continue to make manga for her. I think that's all you can really do. When you lose someone, it's easy to think about joining them, especially someone dear to you. It can feel like everything in your life has completely derailed. But art offers an escape from that feeling, from any negative feeling, in fact. When you spend time creating something, it doesn't matter how weird you are or how isolated you feel, or what terrible things have happened in the past or anything like that. When you're in the zone creatively, everything else falls away, except for what you're making. And whether you're doing it for someone or with someone or both, it's one of the most beautiful feelings there are. Frank is a movie about a lot of things, but I think the final scene sums this up exactly. Frank, the main character of the movie, has been put through the ringer, so to speak. He was the lead singer of a strange indie band, but ended up running away and feeling completely lost after the worst guy ever joined their band and pushed them in a direction that they never wanted to be in. Music was ruined for him for a while, but in this final scene, he's reunited with his band. They don't recognize him at first, because the whole time they've known him, he's worn this strange, huge papier-mâché mask. But once he starts muttering the words to a song and then singing, they very quickly realize who he is and start playing along. And it's not a huge commercial victory. They're just playing in this tiny dive bar with no real audience. In a lot of movies about making music, the big final scene is when the band makes it and plays a sold-out venue. But this movie understands that the ultimate victory is getting to truly connect with the people you make art with, taking off the masks that you all wear and vulnerably expressing yourselves on the deepest level possible. That joy is not something only attained by whatever success is. That joy is creation. And maybe creation can drive you mad. Maybe it can kill you. Maybe it'll push you to the brink. But it's all worth it because of that joy and connection and expression and the love it provides. Making things is what life is all about. Other than romance, creation is the only time you can put your whole heart and soul into something. And sometimes that thing is some stupid bullshit like a cat who can see through wooden doors. And sometimes that thing is a website about 9/11. And sometimes that thing is a hyper-detailed piece of background art. And sometimes that something is a simple, beautiful song about how much you love your friends. Movies about making things show a raw and unfiltered side to the characters that you wouldn't see in any other type of story. And that's why I love these movies so much. Even if they're strange and meta and hard to follow sometimes, I think these movies, more than any other, are the most beautiful kind. I can't believe I'm saying this at the end of a video where I talk about fucking Freddy Got Fingered.